Okay, here we are, March 22nd, March 21st, Friday. Little progress report update. We've had a little bit of a slow going here, mainly because it's been pretty cold around here and trying to get conditions where we can get epoxy to cure properly. You know, I've just put off doing that and concentrated on fine-tuning and tweaking the stuff. But as you can see here, we did get some work done just recently. I got a couple of heaters to put into the shop here, and so, you know, the garage is just too big for me to heat that thing up without costing a small fortune. Anyhow, so this is frame one you see over here and here, and that one there will be for the bow. This is for the stem, the stern, and they're beveled accordingly. And the plank you see going across is a temporary support called a spall, S-P-A-L-L, and the idea is that you put it all together on the drawing that's on the table here, and mark all of the center lines for the center of the boat, and there's some lines that go up at the top here. The very top of this spall is the shear for that particular frame. It's the top of the boat shear. It's where the top plank on both sides go. And you can see I've put on gussets and plugged the holes, but I'm not really happy. You know, the plywood that I got, and that's what it recommends using, is 1/2 inch plywood or 3/8 plywood. The oak veneer on it was really thin, and so when I sanded down from the plugs, getting that smoothed out, it kind of brought through to the next level. So I've got some white oak veneer I've ordered, and I'm thinking that I'm going to try anyhow to glue it up and then trim it, you know, so that it, you know, if I get it glued on with the right kind of glue and everything like that, I'll clamp it in the bench vise and let it set overnight if I need to. And that's part of the time-consuming thing here, is when I put these gussets on, you can only put one side on. You can't, you know, it's almost impossible to keep it all locked into place and everything like that. And you know, to try to flip it is just, you know, it creates a big mess, because really the joint here, the butt joint, that's down right at this level, is just not, you know, it's too delicate of a situation to try to let it move. So you lock everything into place, you put the one side on, you glue it into place and drive the screws, clamp it down, and then you let that sit overnight, and then you can flip it and put the other side on. The other side goes on a little bit easier because there's some stability just in the fact you glued one side there. As you can see here also, frame one has an overlapping bottom to it. The book, John Gardner's book, doesn't really say much about how you hook that together. It doesn't matter of fact, it doesn't say anything about how you hook it together. So I'm taking the liberty of using 6 screws on each side, using a you know, reverse pattern that doesn't interfere with the pattern on this side, so that I've got 12 screws. They're 1.5 inch screws. These are 7/8 thick oak. So I'm using 1.5 inch screws. I'm countersinking them. I'm going to put oak plugs in them, and the plugs that I've cut, the only hardwood I have to cut the plugs for, as you can see here, it stands out, but I use the oak scraps from when I cut the frames to make the plugs, and so they naturally match this wood, not the plywood, which is another issue. So there's a lot of detail here in you know, trying to make sure, for example, that when you're looking at this, this happens to be the port side of the stern frame. And these frames sit in the boat. There, let me get over here and I'll try to explain it to you. But if you look at the frame this direction, you'll see the way that, that the design works is that the station line is showing as being on this side of this piece and this side of this piece. So it has to, you have a crossover of this thing, and this has to be centered on the center line of the boat, but it's kind of cockeyed just slightly when it's, you know, I mean, it's really hard to explain, but you can see there's a 7/8 offset of this side and that side, so you have to be very careful when you're setting this thing up that you have the right piece on the right side. I found that out. I mean, it's not an incurable thing, but I'd like to keep it in accordance with John Gardner's thinking. And what he was basically saying what the drawings show is that the port side of every frame is on the bow, you know, on the bow side of the boat. You know, that port side thing should be on the bow end of the boat. So anyhow, I'm going to finish up this one. I've drilled just one side here, and I'm using, of course, silicon bronze screws. These are 1.5 inches, and they're like I've said before, they're the Fersen head, and I've painted the Fersen tip with a green paint just so I can tell the difference between this and a Phillips head driver. The screw itself, you can see, if you could focus in on it, that it looks for all the world like a Phillips head, but it's a thinner cut in there, and it makes a tighter fit for the bit. You don't find this kind of arrangement in Home Depot stuff. As a matter of fact, finding a Fersen head driver anywhere, you have to go to specialty outfits, mostly boat builders back east, because it seems to be a thing with boat builders, wooden boat builders. And so anyhow, like I say, I've had a lot of fun trying to make all of this stuff true up and come together, but you know, I'm kind of pleased that when I put it together, you know, it's important, for example, that thing sit flat so that it, you know, it doesn't lean, you know, and I had to put a bevel up there, right? I ran these bottom pieces through my jointer over there just to make sure I had flat bottoms on them. And then of course I've cut the what are they called? Limbers, L-I-M-B-E-R. This is a place where the bottom ends and you start going up on the side of the boat. In the inside of the boat, this is to allow the water to run from one end of the boat to the other. There's notches on frame 2 and frame 1. As you can see there, you know, it's the beginning of where the frame starts going up, that you have these limbers in place. So anyhow, and then you leave these spalls on until you've got basically all of the side planking on, you know, everything is in place. I'm struggling a little bit at this time when you know, the reason I started on frame 1 is because I'm struggling with frame 3, to be honest with you. Frame 3, I've got, it's seemingly a fairly straightforward frame because I mean, if you look at it in its truest form, it lays something like this, and then this gusset goes over it here. And but the thing about it is that it mounts, that notch there is mounting on the stem. It's up about maybe 4 or 5 inches above the bottom of the boat, sitting on a 1 3/4 inch thick stem. And there's not many instructions on how you secure it to the stem, because there's nothing here that you can get enough teeth into the stem to be able to make a stable mount at a perfectly vertical location on a sloping part of the stem. Anyhow, we're going to figure out a way to make it come together, but I just thought I would show you some of the little things that are not in the detail. Of course, I'm not expecting that John Gardner's book's going to teach me how to do everything, but the other thing, for example, is the mounting of the stem to the bottom board. Let me see if I can give you an idea. I put this book together with all of John Gardner's information, but let's see if I can find the stem. Yeah, well, here's, for example, this is where the bottom plank comes in and the stem mounts onto it. And it's very critical in order for these measurements, these places where the planks come in up here, to be exact where they need to be. That's sort of the focal point. And he doesn't really say, but I'm assuming I'm going to be driving like 3 number 14 2.5 inch long number 14 silicon bronze screws up underneath that stem and locking it into place. And having that be perfectly flat is also critical, because otherwise your bow is going to kind of go at an angle this way or this way. And and just a little bit off at the bottom end makes a big difference at the tip of the stem. So little issues like that, and but I'm working on them, and it's a real fun challenge. I'm using a lot of gray matter cells that have been dormant for a long time, I guess. But I think I have over on this table over here, I have the number 2 stems all cut, and I've got the gussets in place, and I'm getting ready to glue those up. As soon as I finish working on this frame 1, I'll get rid of this drawing and I have the other drawings up on a shelf over there for frame 2. I'll lay that down here and move the pieces for frame 2 in and start the same process. Frame 2 has it's a butt joint here in the middle where it comes down, and there's a gusset, an oak gusset that covers over that, and that's glued and screwed as well. So that's where we're at now. I'm not sure. Again, I have no schedule for how this works, but the frame is just one part. And I have done preliminary bevels based on the angles that are shown in John Gardner's book, but I've fudged it a little bit on the fat side. In other words, I've made the angles shallower than he says they should be, so I can remove what I need when I get into the final fit up of the planking. When I'm going to be using some battens, some thin battens, to be able to see how that plank will actually go up against that bevel, and if I have a gap on this side of it or something like that, I'll be able to take a plane and shave that as I need to. But so like I say, you can't replace the wood, but so like I say, we're moving along, and this has been a struggle. Part of the struggle I've had just in the past couple of days, for example, is I bought some screws to connect the spall across there, and drove them down in there, and the heads broke off the screws. They're, you know, general hardware store screws, and I guess the quality over the years is deteriorated somewhat. So you have to find good places. I'm finding a lot of recommendations on the internet on what to do about all of these little hiccups I find. But other than that, it's coming along. The thing I'm looking at also is, because what's coming up next after we finish with the frames, of course, is to put the bottom boards together, and I'll do that in the garage. I need to rip some of the boards down to 8-inch wide. I've got some 12-inch wide boards, and I'll rip those down to 8-inch. So I have 3 8-inch boards that make this, and I've got to build the backbone, which is the framework that the boat will sit on upside down while I'm working on putting on all of the planking. So I've got that laid out as my previous videos showed, but I have to deal with the fact that that garage floor slopes to drain as a standard garage floor would. So I, in order to keep it level, I need to build that backbone such that it's straight regardless of what the floor shows. And that's another issue. It's not a big problem, but so there we are, and hopefully that brings you up to date. One of the other things I did as part of that screw issue to keep the heads from popping off, I got this stuff here. I used it when I built the deck on the house. It's called Anchor Seal, and it's used for end grain sealing of hardwoods. And I built the deck out of Ipe. And when I was driving the screws into the Ipe, the deck, I had to pre-drill, and of course driving that stainless steel screw down there into that really hard Ipe overheated the screws bad enough to where they just popped off the head. So I would just dip the tip of the screw into this waxy material here that's the end grain sealer, and all my problems went away. I mean, I tried using, you know, the Johnson's paste wax and all of that stuff, but this thing here seems to be working better. It's, you know, I used it in the silicon bronze screw. I have it on these. I don't put a lot on. I dip it in there, but I wipe off a lot of the excess just to leave a little bit. I don't want it gushing out and smearing over the surface of the wood. So I just give myself enough to ease the threads as they go down in. As you can see, they're, you know, it's a tapered bit. So, you know, it's in it, but it is oak, so it's a little bit harder than the average bear for a wood screw. Especially silicon bronze is not quite as hard as steel, but having had the problems with the hardware store screws, I'm not sure that the steel quality is any better than the silicon bronze. Enough of that. Just give you another progress report in a couple of weeks, and we'll see where it's going. Take care.